Alright, everything's
Everything's
going.
going,
So
yeah.
I'm gonna get a drink of water. And then,
No, we're starting now.
Now!
Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Science Nights. I am the nightly and ever effervescent Sir Josh, and sitting next to me is the errant. Okay, fine. I don't get to give him an intro. Sitting next to me is Adam. And we teased in our first episode that we have like a special correspondent. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our special correspondent, Stephen Smith. Hello, sir.
Yeah. So special I get to ride the short bus. It's awesome.
Why don't you tell new viewers to Science Nights who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm Stephen Smith, and I work for NASA. So I'm an education specialist at Johnson Space Center in beautiful downtown Houston, Texas.
So you're ready to just walk away and we'll let him take over? No? Okay. All right. No, continue. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So yeah, that's here we are. It's August-ish,
It is.
which means it's 907 degrees here in Houston, and I may melt at some point. It'll be awesome.
You're from Texas.
I am from Texas.
So
yes.
you know his feelings.
I absolutely do. I'm from the Corpus Christi area, so just as hot
yeah.
and just as humid.
Well, I moved here recently from Georgia, and I thought it was hot in Georgia.
Yeah.
No.
Well, this isn't our first interaction with Stephen. Adam and I have actually met him last year at a local convention here in Washington, and he was doing a presentation on NASA and the journey to Mars at a little hotel in Renton. And from there, we actually did a Waiting for Players interview with him. So
We did, yes.
for those of you that are interested, there's going to be a link somewhere
where
you can find
either that corner or this corner. I don't know. Somewhere.
where you can find that interview. But after meeting Stephen and over the course of our correspondence together, we realized that not only do we have a great new friend, but we have a great new asset.
I've been told I have a nice asset.
Yeah.
And by the way, saying you met me in a hotel's a little dodgy. I just want to say that.
We didn't even pay you though, so it was totally illegal.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's totally
fine.
fine.
Yeah. Well, that's why we walked away with a new friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
But aside from having the killer awesome job of working at NASA as an educator, what are your science creds, man? Like, give me some.
I gotcha.
Give me some dirt.
So I have an undergraduate degree in neuropsychology.
I'm done talking to you. No.
And then I have a master's degree from UW
Nice.
in infrastructure planning and management, which I put together to create kind of a systems biology thing. So I looked at the built environment as an analog to the natural ecosystem, and designed whole communities based off of closed loop natural ecosystem and homesteading principles and that sort of thing. And I'm getting ready to start at the Arizona State University working on my doctorate.
We're about to know a doctor, Adam.
That's right.
Very nice.
Hey, we will definitely help you prepare for your thesis and your dissertation. Just
Yes.
bounce it off
Sounds
us, and we'll be
brilliant.
entirely
Yes.
jerks to you. Is that?
Well, and I have to admit that only about 85% of the reason I want my doctorate is so that my wife in the British accent will call me the doctor.
Oh. Well,
Very
if she
nice.
gets hers, then you can call her the doctor because
Exactly.
There's a
Yes,
female
now.
doctor moving.
Yes, Jody, I'm so excited. It's going to be awesome. But I was in the science classroom for 20 years, and I worked with at-risk students in the Title I schools, heavily minority. And so now I work for NASA, and I go all over the country teaching teachers who work in those schools today how to reach those kids. So ironically enough, I, the third whitest human being on the planet, am paid by NASA to go talk to people about how to reach minorities.
that is awesome, and it's an excellent dichotomy. I think it works in your favor.
It is.
If only because of the novelty of it, you know.
Right. Right.
People are like, what? So, what I mean, what was the catalyst to your path through science? Like, what made you interested in, first of all, I assume biology, and then after that, your follow-ups.
Yeah. So for me, so I also am an artist. So I also have a bachelor's degree in art, and even in art, I'm interested in people and in how that all works. And I love the complexity of. So I'm not as much interested in just like photosynthesis and the cells and on that level, but it's the big stuff. It's how the whole ecosystem and the biosphere work together.
Sure.
Nice.
So for me, it's all about the complexity of it all. And you get into, it's not quite chaos theory. So chaos theory is that whole, like the butterfly takes off and
tsunami in California.
Yeah. So it's not quite that, but still very adaptable systems. And anytime you're working with people or those kind of big systems, you have these beautiful, big, complex things. So I've just always been interested in that. And I'm a very global thinker. So even working in the school system, I was always thinking that way. And I was always working with my kids along those lines. And so I did a lot of my own research while I was working in the school system as well.
Very nice.
But then coming into NASA, so working as a as a teacher in those schools, there was a NASA guy at a science teachers conference, and he's in the front saying, well, if you have robots in your classroom, you can do this and this. And I raised my hand and I was like, so what if you're just hoping you have textbooks next year? So
did it stop him cold, or?
It kind of did.
Yeah.
So it started a conversation with NASA, and for me, just talking to NASA, I was like, check that off my bucket list, yay.
For sure.
And then a couple of months into having these conversations with them, I got the phone call that they said, hey, do you want to come work for NASA? And I, of course, being the sarcastic guy I am, my answer literally was, I'm sorry, is this a stupid question day? So yeah, of course I want to work for NASA. So
Sure.
So that was now a year ago. My 1 year anniversary was August 1st. And
Congratulations.
I went from, thank you.
Yeah.
And I was working very peripherally in the university, and now they've moved me to Johnson Space Center, and I get to be a real boy. It's awesome.
We already covered in our first episode some of the fantastic science communicators out there. Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, among others. What made you decide to be a STEM cheerleader, communicator?
By and large, those guys. I grew up with that, and it just develops this hunger in you. And when I think about the scientists who work quietly behind the scenes in the labs, nobody knows who they are. And it's a thing in science that if you've learned something new, if you've discovered something new, you got to tell people. You have to publish it. So if you've cured cancer and you don't tell anybody, then what does it matter?
Right.
So I decided to sort of follow along that path more than doing the locomotion of the Madagascar three-toed caterpillar or something.
For sure.
So those are the guys that were my heroes. So Carl Sagan, Bill Nye. I would have Neil deGrasse Tyson's baby were it biologically possible. I love those guys.
I
They're
think
just
a lot
awesome.
of us are there,
Right. So for me, and then also being a teacher, that was the part that I loved. I loved sharing the discoveries with the kids and watching the excitement and whatever. And so now I'm able to do that on a huge scale, going all over the country and sort of like a pyramid scheme, making it happen, being the NASA evangelist. It's awesome.
Well, we will definitely do what we can to help in that regard. One of the things that we enjoy on Science Nights is communicating science. That's actually one of the base tenets of the show.
It's pretty much the biggest purpose of it. So.
Yeah.
Well, the need for it is so obvious. There was a thing on Facebook recently, and I'm sure that's not where it started, but showing Senator Al Franken talking to Rick Perry.
Oh, and he made the senator cry. Yes.
So he basically, Rick Perry says, I don't really understand this climate science stuff. So why don't we just have this red team who comes in and tries to find some alternative and listen to both sides? Well, that's what science is. By the time when you publish it, that's what you're doing. You're putting your work out there and saying, tear this apart, find what's wrong with it. And when it goes through all that, and now 97%, I think it's even higher now, but 97% of all of the people looking at this are in agreement. That doesn't happen ever in science.
Yeah. or in the regular world.
Yes.
I think the people that have the 97% approval are like people on TV maybe. 97%
Even then, even then,
it's
still,
in the 70s,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Right? But just that basic lack of understanding about how science works on a fundamental level, I think that's the problem. And the only fix for it is people
Cowbell?
shouting it. More cowbell.
Sorry.
The only solution is people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye. If I can humbly put myself somewhere in that list, shouting it from the rooftops and actually teaching people what science is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would add to that a greater level of skepticism.
Yes.
I mean,
by far.
What we've learned from the last year solely in the realm of sociology is that people will believe almost anything now.
Yeah.
So that's a big problem. A healthy level of skepticism injected into society now would probably be one of the best things to happen. And one of the most skeptical professions or things out there is science. The scientific method is based around skepticism.
That's what we do.
So there's no reason not to tout that.
Exactly.
And I think the other, and that goes hand in hand with critical thinking too. Not only understanding, not only understanding that you need to be skeptical of something, but also picking it apart from an objective stance.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think did you guys touch on in your last episode? Did you talk about the whole Aristotle thing? And
no, not yet. That was my next question for you. What would Stephen like to talk about today?
So all of that sort of leads me into this talk about. So we think about science and we think about some of those Greek philosophers, right? So Aristotle, Socrates, and you think about them as being great thinkers, and they were. But there was a vast difference between everything that happened before Galileo and the things that have happened since.
Sure.
What Galileo was amazing about, it wasn't just that he looked through the lens of the telescope. He didn't invent the telescope. It was already there. No. He just looked through it. But what Galileo did that no one else had done before him was he had that philosophical idea that this should work, and then he tested it. That's the difference.
Absolutely.
That's the thing that made everything different, is all of a sudden it had to be based on evidence. So prior to that, the philosophers, it was basically just who was the best arguer, who could come up with the most logical statement, like the flat earth thing. So yes, look out there, it freaking looks flat. I get that.
Yeah, but then we had this guy who walked 200 miles and then back and figured it out based on that.
Yes, exactly right. He looked at a stake in the ground and was able to figure out, holy crap, that's not right.
Yeah.
But that's the difference. That's the difference between philosophy and science. So philosophy is based on, I think this and it sort of makes sense. Science is, it doesn't matter what you believe. It matters what you can prove. It matters what you have evidence for. And that's what we're lacking. And that's what makes Galileo so amazing, is because he was really the first one. I mean, there were a few guys like and I wish I could remember his name, who did what you were talking about, who set up the two stakes.
Of the Earth
Well,
there's also all of the. We'll probably touch on this on a later episode, but there's also most everything that was developed in the Arabian desert, and then the Crusades happened.
Yes, exactly right. So we've had periods of time in our past before where religion and philosophy were at the paramount, and we call those, without any deviation, the Dark Ages.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the most of the stars today have Arabic names. The word algebra is an Arabic word. They became the keeper of all things historic and scientific, while the Western Europeans were caught up in their churches and their superstition. And then now, unfortunately, the same thing is happening to the Arab world, where they're being led by philosophers and their religious leaders, and they're getting away from that as well. And that's a lot of the reasons that things are going so off the rails right now in both sections, is that's who's in power there and unfortunately here now.
Yeah. now.
Yeah.
It has been building.
Let me add. Steven says as a private citizen.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to cover that one. No, for sure. And we'll never doubt you for that. Your First Amendment rights are not protected to you by your job.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But that's an important difference and an important thing for people to understand. That when a climate scientist says, we're warming and we were warmer now than we were before, and here's the things that we know are causing it, they're not just saying, well, that's what I think.
Right.
They're saying that's what I can prove.
Well, but Steven, it's snowing in Denver at the normal time it does every year. What are you talking about, global warming?
Yeah. And that opens up a lovely discussion of the difference between weather and climate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but unfortunately, your standard argument against climate change is it's just as warm as it is always in July.
Right.
It's the same as it is every year.
Yeah.
Well, no, not really.
No, not even a little bit.
5 years ago, Facebook was still a thing. People were still posting pictures. I didn't see pictures of Arizona melting. I saw pictures of Arizona's entire melting. That's not a thing. Yes, it's hot in the desert. It's not, let's melt commercial grade plastic in the desert.
Right.
Right.
It just for a lot of people. Go ahead.
The chunk of Antarctica that just fell off that's like the size of the state of Vermont.
Exactly.
I mean, that's not okay.
For a lot of people, they just won't care until it directly affects their life, like in a huge way, until they notice it. So,
well, and also too, there is a positive movement right now. As one of the big problems has been the money behind creating skepticism, but not the healthy skepticism.
Sure.
But the skepticism over the scientific facts.
Right.
Was actually funded by big oil, all that sort of stuff.
Oh, for sure.
But now those companies, and this is a great thing, and they need to be heralded and lauded for this. A lot of the oil companies have stopped thinking of themselves as oil companies and started thinking of themselves as energy companies.
Oh yeah, and they've actually been funding the reverse side of it now.
Yes, exactly right. Mm-hmm. So now those guys are coming out and saying, you know what, this is us, and this is we're doing this, and now that solar and some of those are becoming cheaper than the oil and the natural gas and that sort of thing, these companies are getting interested in it. Mm-hmm. And again, they're stopping thinking of themselves as oil companies and starting to think of themselves as energy providers.
Which is a great distinction that should really happen.
Right. It is. It really is. And if we can keep that going, I think things are you'll see a change and see a turnaround.
That's also that is definitely a trend or something that maybe big coal should look at as well, right? Stop thinking of yourselves as we're the sole provider of this because this is killing the earth. Why don't you think of yourselves as like, well, we provide energy. That's a great idea.
Exactly
Unfortunately, you have generation upon generation, especially in coal, this is the family business. We provide
That's
energy
exactly
from
right.
coal.
Right. Yeah.
We're reliable. This is time tested, but then
we're in a.
There's France is pledged to be entirely carbon free by the time 2020, 2022, something like that. Yeah.
Right. And that's all great, but it only works if we all do it.
Oh, for sure.
Exactly.
And what people don't realize also is we're in a historical period that's exactly like the introduction of the industrial age. So the industrial age came in right around late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yep.
Well, we've been in the industrial age up until now. And now we're no longer in the industrial age. We're moving into the digital age. And anytime that happens, you have these leftovers. So when the industrial age came in and people started thinking about machinery to make their life easier, prior to that, a lot of the things that we do now with simple machines were done by people.
Right.
For example, there was a guy who you would hire to come and wake you up in the morning.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have alarm clocks yet.
Right.
So he would walk in, he had this huge long stick, and he would tap on your window and wake you up in the morning. And he was called, hilariously enough, he was the knocker-upper.
Great name.
Popular guy in the town, let me tell you.
I mean, city like New York, you might have 10, 20 knocker-uppers per neighborhood.
That's right. That's exactly right. But so imagine, though, that guy having the same conversation that the coal miners are having today.
Mm-hmm.
That guy was like,
I'll be out of a
doing
job.
the South Park, they're taking our jobs.
Yeah, exactly.
They're bringing in this stupid little machine. What am I supposed to do to support my family? So that's the coal miners today. They're a leftover from the industrial age, and they're like, yeah, but my granddaddy died of black lung when he was 30. It's a family tradition. But it's still a leftover, and it's that growing pain moving into a new age, moving into a new age of digital, and we've got to start rethinking. And unfortunately, and so people like me are even more important because people aren't toot my own horn a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, man.
But people aren't going into those fields. So the jobs in computer science, in physics, and all those sort of things are going this way, but the people getting advanced degrees in those is not. And so we've got to change the thinking and get those kids to start thinking about STEM-related jobs and stop thinking about, well, I'm just going to go to work in the factory, or I'm just going to go work in the field or whatever, because those jobs just aren't going to be there.
So prior to this show, you and I were discussing Carl Sagan's books, Pale Blue Dot, Billions Billions, and The Demon Haunted World. All great books, and I recommend them to everybody. Just
absolutely,
and not science inclined. I'm not science inclined, but they're fantastic books.
Yes.
He says in there that the other healthy part of science, like the first one is skepticism, but the other healthy part is the wonder. And what he unfortunately sees in modern schools, and this was back in the 90s, and I think it's even more true today, is you have grade school level, so like 1st to 5th grade, you have kids that are enthused about science to the point they're going to burst. They love doing science all the time. But then by the time you meet a senior in high school, science is drummed out of them as boring or elitist or counterculture even. And I'm wondering how many people like in your profession find that true, and also how to combat it.
Yeah, so my job is the combating it. So my job is to teach teachers science, because the problem is the teachers in the classroom are afraid of science too, especially in the elementary level. So in junior high, high school, you have a science teacher. In high school, it's very likely that science teacher is a scientist of some sort who is coming into education from some other field. In elementary, that's not the case.
It's
in
probably
elementary,
like a gym teacher.
In elementary, you've got a teacher who's teaching English, math, social studies, whatever. That same teacher is teaching all those things.
Right.
And after the George W. Bush era with the No Child Left Behind, there was a real push for just reading and math. And science and social studies and all those things got really pushed to the back burner. And so even today, students are lucky in elementary school if they get science once a week, once every other week, and that's it. And kids are scientists. That baby that pushes the thing off the
table, end table, or whatever,
over and over and over again, they're testing it. Like, what happens when I do this? Look, it happened again. They are scientists at heart. But at some point along the way, especially with girls, we teach them that science is not for them. And so for me in the classroom, what I saw by the time the kids got to me in high school, so again, having met me ever, you will be shocked to learn that I can be a smart aleck sometimes.
What?
So on my right? So on my tests, I would always have one answer that was so outrageous, like it was some crazy made up word or something just like way out there. And more often than not, females and minority males would choose that because their belief that they couldn't understand science was so deeply entrenched that if there was a word there that they couldn't read and understand, they assumed that had to be the right word.
Gotcha.
So our job as teachers is to, in a lot of ways, demystify what science is. That it's not this thing with all these huge words and a bunch of white guys who look like me wearing bow ties and lab coats. That science is a way of understanding the world around you. It's a way of being skeptical. It's a way of like chasing your wonder. It's a way of doing all of those things. Science isn't science is taught in schools right now as a noun. It's taught as a series. You have to learn this series of facts. But that's not what science is. Science is a verb. It's a way to do things. It's an action. It's a way to understand the world around you and solve problems that you have every day. And we need to get to that and get away from the list of facts and the list of whatever, and just memorizing the history of what everybody else has discovered, and teach kids how to discover things on their own.
Absolutely.
I'd agree with that, but I'd like to put a little asterisk on the history thing. I think
Boom, hit it.
I am such a huge fan of history, especially in terms of science. And
Yes.
While you're right, it is more of a verb. It needs to be more of a verb. It would be remiss to neglect the awe of the people that came before us.
Absolutely. So here's how I combat that. So when I taught Newton's 3 laws of motion,
Sure.
for example, what I did was I introduced a project to my students, and in my class we built roller coasters. So they had tracks and tubes and things like that, and then ball bearings. So they couldn't use like a motor or they had to use gravity. They had to have it drop and twist and turn or whatever. So after they did this, as they're doing that, they're discovering that the ball will stay where it is until you push it. And then once it moves, it'll keep moving until
Something stops
it's acted up.
Yeah. Nice.
And they learn that
A body in motion stays in motion. And...
right? They learn that the 3 laws by discovering them.
Sure.
And then after that project, as we're talking about it, I say, and by the way, when you saw this, that is Newton's first law of physics. And the way he discovered that was blah, blah, blah. So they've discovered it on their own.
You've
And now I'm
contextualized it
putting
before
That's exactly
teaching
right.
it. That's awesome.
And then when I say Newton did this and Newton did that, they're connecting with it in a different way because Newton is doing this thing that they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just
so
like one of the most celebrated scientists in the world.
Exactly right.
Oh
That's
my
exactly
God.
right. That's exactly right. So
That's
so
empowering. That's
It's called
awesome.
the word for that is cultural relevance. So I'm showing that kid that not only can they do science, they just did the same science that the most celebrated scientist on the planet ever did that. And you did it on your own, and you discovered it on your own the same way he did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So, I want to end on something fun because we're getting down to
Okay.
it. All of this has been great, by the way. Like I
Yes.
don't want to elude that nothing else has been fun. I could listen to you for days. I want to talk about an astral regularity that is coming up, and maybe Adam can put a little bit more clarification on this. I'm kind of leading you into
the
this.
solar eclipse.
There
is
you
where
go.
you're going.
There you go.
So this is what the first time in like 90 years or something that
99 years that you've been able to see it as
Yeah.
well on the continental United States.
through the mainland of America. So
Yes.
United States.
So what's happening?
It is on August 21st, and
Yes.
it depends on where you're going to be, but I think it's around like 10 a.m. is going to be the starting time if you're in like the Oregon, Idaho area.
Yes. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And so
You can find a pretty good map on the internet. You know,
We'll put a
it's
link
all over the place.
here.
I was going
There
to say,
will be
I
a
can
link.
provide a map for you that will show the path going through the center.
Very nice.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes. And if you go to nasa.gov and you type in the little search bar, Eclipse 2017, there is a collaboration between NASA and NOAA and the American Association for the Advancement of Science and 2 or 3 other huge groups to put out information. So you can go there to get glasses that you can wear to see the eclipse. You can go there to learn how to make all the things that you can like look through the peepholes and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
You can learn exactly where it's going to be. You can learn how long it's going to be, full where you are, or how much of coverage you get to see where you are. So if you're in Seattle, you're not going to see 100%,
Yeah.
but you're going to be close. It's going to be about 90 to 80% somewhere in there, up in there. I'm stuck in Texas, unfortunately, because I'm doing a workshop on the 21st. I'm a little upset about it. I'm a little bitter, but it's going to be fine. I'll get to see about 70% coverage where I am.
Nice. Yeah,
it's still going to be an amazing thing to check out, no matter where you are.
It is. It absolutely
as long as
is.
you can see some of it.
so
you know?
this guy's lucky he gets off work before the eclipse occurs.
I have planned this vacation for a while. So.
This guy's on vacation.
Nice.
I will be at work, and I've already told my boss, hey, between 9 and 11, I'm going to be taking regular trips outside to see where the sun is.
Yeah.
And he's like, why? And I'm like, that's total solar eclipse, man. It's possible. And he
Right.
goes, well, as long as it doesn't interfere too much. I'm like, I guess we're going to have a bigger discussion about this.
So it's important that we say, do not look
don't
directly
look at
the
it.
sun.
Absolutely. Never
Now-
look directly at the sun without eye protection or
Right.
through, like you were saying,
Right.
through a pinhole.
Yes.
A piece of paper.
Now, I'm going to say this because I'm going to hope that most of our viewer, listener, pod people
Yes.
are adults. So if you are in a place that has a 100% absolute total eclipse, not even a little bit poking out,
Right.
and during the time when the moon is completely and totally 100% covering the sun,
Which only lasts like 2 minutes at the most.
at the most,
At the
it's
very,
like-
very most.
I
yes.
think the longest one
It's
I've
like-
seen is like 2 minutes and 40 seconds.
Okay, yeah.
But when it is 100% completely and totally covered for whatever period of that time is, you actually can look at it.
Yes.
But that's it.
But that's it.
Then don't do it again, because
Not
then you're
before
looking
that,
at the
not
sun.
after that,
Right.
right then.
Yes. And you have
will
to stop
burn your
before that
retina.
little sliver comes back. So.
Right? I
You'll
don't-
put your eye out, kid.
It's weird, right? Because like you could tell any school child or any person, don't look at the sun,
Right.
and they're like, duh. But then they're like,
Right.
oh, an eclipse, it's covered. No,
It's covered.
Yeah.
it's still
Right.
the sun.
And another cool thing to look for, so look for the shadows. So as the moon is covering the sun, you'll notice that shadows that would be straight take on this crescent shape.
Yes.
And that's the only time it happens. So you'll never see that any other time ever, ever, ever. So the sun itself is awesome, but look at the shadows and look at some of the stuff around at the same time.
Yep.
And scientists also look at the behavior of animals, because there are animals that are nocturnal and all of a sudden it's nighttime and they're like freaking out.
Right.
I would see the same for those who are in the day. Like I would
Yes.
see how they would react, because all of a sudden it's nighttime. I guess it's
Absolutely.
time
Yeah.
to go
Well,
to bed.
I mean, you could easily
Right?
see if you didn't know what was happening, why people a long time ago assumed something terrible.
the gods were mad.
Right.
The gods
That's
were
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a story, I don't know how apocryphal it is, that Christopher Columbus, knew there was going to be an eclipse and the people weren't working hard enough, and he said, if you didn't work harder, I'm going to take away the sun. And they were like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
whatever.
And then the sun goes
This
like, good, we're
guy.
sorry, we're kidding, bring it back.
We didn't mean it. We didn't mean it.
And so teachers out there, if you teach probably first grade or below, there is comedy gold that could happen during that moment there.
This
And
is
if
for
you ever
you
want to
summer
get-
school teachers.
That's exactly right. So summer school teachers or parents of very small children.
There you go.
If you don't eat your dinner, or
I'll
actually I
take
guess
the
it'd be
sun.
breakfast or lunch there,
Yeah.
I'm going to take the sun away.
Hey, Mom, it's been a full hour since I didn't eat my breakfast. Where's this? Oh, my God.
Exactly. I'm sorry, bring it back, bring it back.
I'll eat it cold. I don't care.
But really, for anybody if you have kids, or if you don't have kids, if you're just a big kid like me, I really highly recommend you go to NASA.gov, type in eclipse, or even just Google NASA eclipse 2017. There are so many resources on there, and it's in a kind of a really simple PDF form you can print out. It's got activities and different things you can do. It shows you how to make a camera obscura so you can see it like projected
Nice.
and watch the whole thing. And so it's a great resource, and like I said, like 4 huge organizations have gone together to put it all together.
And
Very nice.
this also ties in. This is doing science. Viewing
Exactly right.
Being
Yeah,
able to
definitely.
safely view an eclipse, that's science.
That is 100% science. It is.
Stephen, it has been immensely fun having you here today. When can we gotta do this again? We gotta
Yes.
We gotta meet up. We gotta do this again.
Absolutely.
So hey, listener, viewer, pod person, you're gonna see him again in the near
Absolutely.
future.
Totes.
I would say be sure to follow him on Twitter. You are at NASA STEM, something like that.
NASA STEM Educate.
You are this link right here.
Yes. And so in my Twitter account, it's all NASA related or education related. So I don't post any of look, I had this for dinner, or random hypothetical politician sucks or whatever. I don't do any of that stuff.
Of course.
If you want that fun stuff, you have to follow me on Facebook.
That's where you and I look out.
That's where you guys. That's where you guys. But my Twitter feed, it's all NASA related, and so NASA had every line of business that we do, every satellite, every just whatever has its own Twitter handle thing.
So Juno's got one. Cassini's
yes,
got one. Or has
absolutely.
One.
So I sort of filter through all of those, and when they have cool stuff, then I just repost it or whatever. So instead of having to go to all those places, you can just follow me, and I'll put the cool stuff in there.
He does the work for you.
I'm saying, help me help you.
Exactly.
Make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
I try.
Well, on that note, thank you guys for watching and or listening. And we'll see you guys next week with another fantastic, fantabulous episode of Science Nights.
Science.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.